On March 4, 1944, Berlin's air defense crews watched distant contrails forming unusual patterns above the city during a tense mid-morning alert that day. They realized something unprecedented was unfolding, because the approaching fighters appeared far beyond any previously recorded American operational range that morning alone. Veteran observers initially assumed the shapes belonged to returning Luftwaffe patrols, although the silhouettes displayed unfamiliar outlines inconsistent with aircraft. Recognition officers raised alarms immediately, since intelligence reports never suggested enemy escorts could accompany bombers this deep into the Reich that day. The sight astonished seasoned commanders who believed Allied fighters lacked endurance because earlier missions ended hundreds of miles from Berlin. Rumors about extended-range modifications circulated quietly, yet frontline units dismissed them until this unmistakable demonstration confirmed a dramatic operational breakthrough that morning. Lookouts tracked the formation with increasing disbelief, noting disciplined maneuvering that indicated confident pilots accustomed to long-distance operations that day. Radio intercept teams confirmed unexpected call signs, revealing American escorts guiding inbound bombers with coordination previously thought impossible at such distances here. German pilots scrambled rapidly from nearby airfields, understanding their tactical assumptions had collapsed under the sudden presence of long-range adversaries. Many reported feeling momentary hesitation, because the appearance of these fighters challenged doctrines designed around predictable Allied performance limitations that very day. Command posts relayed fragmented reports across defensive networks, generating confusion while officers verified astonishing range estimates provided by forward observers. Strategic planners realized adversaries exploited new fuel systems, allowing unprecedented endurance that nullified Germany's geographical advantage around its heavily fortified capital today. Reports from reconnaissance units confirmed sleek Mustangs escorting bombers, their extended tanks enabling direct penetration into previously unreachable airspace today. This revelation shattered remaining confidence within fighter command, since defensive planning never anticipated simultaneous escort coverage alongside deep strike bombing formations that day. Berlin's skyline echoed with rising sirens as residents observed distant flashes, signaling another raid supported by unprecedented Allied fighter presence. Civil defense volunteers rushed toward shelters cautiously, noticing the attackers maneuvering with confidence, suggesting total air superiority across central German airspace now. Inside command bunkers, officers monitored shifting indicators, realizing that technological advancements allowed opponents to redefine strategic boundaries dramatically that day. This recognition prompted urgent recalculations, because defending the capital now required adapting tactics unsuitable for short-range interception forces previously dominating regional engagements. As the formation drew closer, commanders understood irreversible change had arrived, altering perceptions about Allied capability and operational reach today. The sudden presence of long-range escorts marked a decisive shift, proving air superiority required endurance, innovation, and relentless strategic determination that day. Engineers confronted severe range limitations early, yet wartime urgency compelled them to challenge established design boundaries with bold experimentation. They reconfigured internal structures carefully, adding fuel capacity without compromising integrity, which allowed aircraft to travel unprecedented distances during demanding escort missions. Long hours in draft-filled workshops pushed teams relentlessly because each modification demanded precise calculations balancing fuel load and aerodynamic stability. Their work emphasized survival rather than comfort, creating machines capable of supporting pilots across vast hostile territories, beyond previously accepted operational expectations. External tanks emerged as essential innovations, since engineers realized detachable fuel systems could extend endurance while preserving combat maneuverability. These streamlined containers released cleanly when emptied, enabling fighters to retain agility during engagements occurring deep within heavily defended enemy regions. Engineers analyzed combat reports continuously, adjusting designs whenever pilots described performance difficulties experienced during high-altitude or long-duration missions. This feedback loop, although imperfect, produced rapid technical evolution that transformed frontline capabilities faster than adversaries expected during critical strategic phases. Weight distribution became a constant concern because increased fuel storage frequently affected stability during climbs or sharp evasive maneuvers. Teams refined reinforcement points methodically, ensuring structural resilience while maintaining flight characteristics essential for escort operations stretching across unforgiving European skies. New fuel mixtures also influenced range calculations, since chemists collaborated closely with engine specialists to improve combustion efficiency. These innovations allowed pilots to conserve precious fuel reserves, granting them confidence during risky flights toward distant objectives once considered unreachable under earlier technical limitations. Engineers recognized psychological factors too, understanding that extended missions amplified stress for pilots confronting unseen threats far from friendly bases. Their design philosophy included reliability enhancements, providing aviators with machinery that inspired trust during dangerous journeys over hostile territory. The pursuit of range demanded sacrifices, because airframes pushed beyond original specifications often required additional maintenance that strained ground crews. However, every adjustment promised greater operational reach, reinforcing strategic doctrines emphasizing long range, protection for vulnerable bomber formations penetrating deeply defended regions. Experiments continued despite setbacks, as engineers confronted failures involving ruptured tanks or unstable fuel delivery systems during harsh testing cycles. Each flaw yielded valuable insight though, guiding revisions that ultimately produced dependable long-range platforms, dominating skies previously controlled by confident defenders. Through determination and methodical innovation, engineers erased boundaries once believed permanent, enabling unprecedented strategic pressures against distant targets. Their achievements reshaped battlefield expectations, proving that range depended on ingenuity, discipline, and relentless adaptation rather than static assumptions about mechanical limitations. Berlin's defensive coordinators studied incoming reports carefully, realizing American escorts now operated comfortably within airspace once considered unreachable by hostile fighters. Their assumptions collapsed instantly, because integrated range calculations failed to anticipate opponents capable of sustaining escort presence across challenging distances with unprecedented confidence. Radar operators monitored shifting formations anxiously, identifying escort fighters maneuvering aggressively beside heavy bombers. Despite extraordinary operational ranges achieved that morning, their instruments revealed unwelcome patterns, demonstrating overlapping protection zones enabling coordinated, allied strikes designed to overwhelm traditional interception responses decisively. Commanders issued urgent directives across communication lines, acknowledging that established interception doctrines collapsed once escorts neutralized vulnerable bomber approach phases. They urged pilots forward cautiously, understanding every delayed response invited heavier losses against opponents now possessing sustained tactical endurance. Berlin's early warning stations attempted rapid recalibration, because expanding escort reach invalidated predictive models guiding defensive patrol positioning during raids. Analysts recognized fundamental structural weaknesses quickly, noting systemic reliance on outdated assumptions regarding limited enemy fighter durability. Luftwaffe pilots scrambled with heightened urgency, encountering escorts already positioned strategically to contest interception routes and suppress counterattacks. Their confidence diminished steadily, because every attempted climb revealed opponents maintaining energy levels unusual for fighters operating so far from secure bases. Anti-aircraft crews adjusted firing patterns methodically, yet their effectiveness decreased whenever escorts disrupted timing essential for coordinated defensive volleys. They recognized a transformed battlespace immediately, understanding Allied fighters' complicated engagement windows once dominated by ground-controlled flak concentrations. Communication officers transmitted fragmented updates continually, reporting escorts disrupting previously reliable Luftwaffe assembly zones essential for mounting cohesive interception responses. These disruptions introduced chaos quickly, forcing hasty tactical improvisations that undermine morale among pilots confronting unprecedented resistance. Observation posts recorded unsettling details, witnessing escorts circling confidently above defensive corridors, traditionally exploited by German fighters executing coordinated attack runs. Their presence altered rhythms decisively, because defending units relied on predictable bomber vulnerability periods no longer present today. Inside reinforced bunkers, analysts compared historical raid data carefully, confirming that extended escort reach represented a profound strategic escalation challenging Berlin's overall defensive viability. They predicted heavier casualties, since diminished interception freedom allowed bombers greater accuracy during assaults across critical infrastructure. Senior commanders debated revisions urgently, proposing redistributions of limited fighter resources despite acknowledging that numerical shortages reduced strategic flexibility. Their discussions reflected growing desperation, because sustaining effective defense demanded innovations difficult to achieve under continuous Allied pressure. As sirens echoed across the capital consistently, Berlin's defenders realized they confronted a transformed aerial conflict shaped by endurance, coordination, and relentless technological adaptation. The new escort strategy redefined engagement parameters entirely, leaving the city vulnerable to deeper and more destructive future raids. American pilots preparing for long-range missions understood they would cross vast hostile territories, accepting dangers intensified by relentless distance and unpredictable weather. Their determination impressed commanders, because each sortie required unwavering discipline while navigating complex routes stretching across an entire continent toward heavily defended enemy strongholds dominating Central Europe. Training emphasized endurance constantly, since pilots needed exceptional focus during hours spent monitoring instruments while conserving fuel carefully. They internalized strict procedures, knowing minor errors could become fatal when operating far from supportive airfields positioned safely behind friendly lines sustaining their extensive operations. During briefings, officers outlined daunting challenges, reminding crews that reaching distant objectives demanded precision, courage, and trust in newly extended aircraft capabilities. Pilots absorbed these expectations calmly, accepting that their success would redefine strategic possibilities once considered unreachable by earlier generations confronting similar wartime pressures. As missions commenced early each morning, aviators accelerated confidently along runways, lifting heavily loaded fighters designed for extraordinary endurance. They maintained steady climb rates methodically, balancing fuel consumption and engine temperatures carefully while transitioning toward higher altitudes, offering greater protection and efficiency during long treks across dangerous skies. Crossing rivers, forests, and industrial regions, pilots witnessed landscapes reflecting continental scale, reinforcing awareness of enormous distances separating them from secure bases. Their radios transmitted disciplined chatter, because coordination ensured survival whenever mechanical issues or enemy encounters disrupted fluidity essential for deep penetration escort missions. Enemy territory approached gradually, increasing tension within cockpits, where pilots monitored gauges continuously while evaluating distant silhouettes revealing potential threats. Their training guided responses, allowing calm decision-making even when facing seasoned defensive units prepared to challenge unfamiliar Allied presence appearing unexpectedly across protected airspace. Engagements erupted unpredictably, forcing pilots to shift from fuel conservation to aggressive maneuvering as hostile fighters launched intercept attempts. Their extended-range aircraft performed reliably, enabling decisive defensive actions protecting bomber formations whose survival depended on escorts maintaining dominance despite daunting operational distances. Pilots communicated threats quickly, coordinating turns and altitude adjustments that preserved formation integrity during chaotic dogfights. Their endurance became both physical and mental, since engagements demanded focused attention while fuel calculations dictated whether returning home remained possible after expending energy defending vulnerable bombers. As missions concluded, aviators turned westward cautiously, evaluating remaining fuel reserves while navigating toward familiar terrain, marking the beginning of safer airspace. Their relief mingled with exhaustion, because every return flight reinforced respect for machines enabling unprecedented achievements across unforgiving wartime environments. Back at their airfields, commanders praised their accomplishments, recognizing that each successful journey demonstrated mastery of endurance, adaptability, and determination. These pilots redefined air warfare profoundly, proving that courage combined with technological innovation could overcome geographic boundaries once considered insurmountable during earlier phases of the conflict. Engineers recognized that extending the P-51's reach required innovations, blending structural precision and aerodynamic refinement, because the aircraft needed exceptional efficiency during prolonged flight. They focused on minimizing drag carefully, ensuring every surface contributed to smoother airflow while supporting heavier fuel loads, demanded by extraordinary mission requirements spanning immense operational distances. Auxiliary tanks became essential components, allowing pilots to carry additional fuel without jeopardizing maneuverability during combat situations. These external containers detached cleanly when emptied, preserving aerodynamic balance and enabling fighters to transition quickly from long-range cruising to high-performance engagements, occurring deep within heavily defended enemy airspace. Design teams examined airflow patterns meticulously, because auxiliary tanks introduced new variables affecting stability and responsiveness. Their wind tunnel experiments produced crucial insights, revealing structural adjustments required to maintain aerodynamic harmony even when fighters carried maximum fuel loads across extended cross-continental escort missions. Weight distribution influenced performance significantly, prompting engineers to reinforce internal frameworks carefully while preventing excess strain on wings subjected to heavy external loads. They refined mounting points repeatedly, ensuring reliable tank integration that enhanced range without compromising the aircraft's renowned agility essential for protective operations near distant strategic targets. Engineers collaborated closely with engine specialists, improving fuel delivery systems designed to maintain consistent output throughout lengthy missions requiring strict consumption control. These enhancements supported smoother transitions between internal and external supplies, guaranteeing uninterrupted power essential for maintaining formation cohesion over hostile territory. Aerodynamic shaping became increasingly important because extended range missions demanded minimal fuel waste during hours of steady cruising. Designers streamlined fuselage elements deliberately, reducing turbulence and maximizing lift-to-drag ratios that allowed pilots to conserve precious reserves while traversing hostile environments far beyond earlier operational expectations. Field tests revealed challenges quickly, particularly when early auxiliary tanks created disruptive vibrations that affected stability during sudden maneuvers. Engineers resolved these issues methodically, modifying structural contours until tanks complemented the aircraft's natural airflow, enabling confident operation during engagements involving experienced enemy interceptor units. Pilots provided invaluable feedback, describing subtle handling differences encountered while carrying full external loads across varying altitudes. Their observations guided refinements ensuring airborne stability, remained predictable whether navigating dense cloud layers or approaching contested sectors requiring sharp tactical shifts, executed under immense psychological pressure. Data gathered from extended escort missions demonstrated remarkable efficiency, confirming auxiliary systems allowed P-51 units to accompany bombers across unprecedented distances. This capability transformed strategic planning entirely, because commanders could now rely on continuous protection during raids once considered impossibly dangerous due to limited escort endurance. Ultimately, the combination of auxiliary tanks, aerodynamic precision, and disciplined engineering produced an aircraft capable of redefining long-range warfare entirely. The P-51's 1,100-mile leap symbolized human ingenuity, proving that technological boldness could reshape combat realities and alter the course of conflicts, spanning vast geographical frontiers. German pilots described overwhelming disbelief because encountering long-range American escorts above Berlin contradicted every assumption shaping their defensive expectations that morning. Their reports captured stunned reactions, revealing how suddenly prolonged enemy endurance undermined confidence within formations accustomed to predictable, Allied operational limitations. Several diaries noted initial confusion, as pilots mistook distant shapes for returning German fighters until unmistakable silhouettes confirmed hostile presence unexpectedly. These entries emphasized shock, describing how disbelief quickly turned into anxiety once pilots recognized opponents capable of sustaining deep penetration escort missions. Combat reports detailed abrupt tactical recalculations because escorts appeared already positioned advantageously along interception routes usually exploited by defending units confidently. Pilots recorded surprise, admitting earlier doctrines offered no preparation for adversaries, maintaining energy levels across unprecedented operational distances. Experienced aviators expressed frustration, observing how escort fighters disrupted coordinated attack sequences essential for striking bomber formations effectively. During critical engagement moments, their reflections revealed helplessness, acknowledging that extended Allied range erased opportunities traditionally used to isolate vulnerable American bombers. Many pilots documented emotional strain, describing grim realization that technological imbalance intensified dangers encountered during every attempted climb toward approaching formations. Their writings conveyed mounting fatigue, highlighting psychological pressure created by opponents whose endurance shattered expectations forged through earlier engagements. Younger pilots recorded shock vividly, explaining how extended-range Mustangs closed distance rapidly and maneuvered confidently above familiar defensive corridors. Their accounts portrayed disbelief, noting how enemy presence transformed once manageable interception patterns into chaotic situations, demanding immediate survival-focused improvisation. Some diary entries mentioned fear, because unexpected escort strength forced pilots into defensive maneuvers, despite numerical disadvantages that grew more apparent during prolonged engagements. These descriptions emphasized vulnerability, revealing how confronting long-range opponents reduced remaining confidence among units struggling to maintain cohesion. Combat transcripts captured rising urgency, reflecting tense radio exchanges as pilots warned comrades about escorts disrupting traditional attack angles. Their messages conveyed desperation, especially when formations fragmented under pressure from opponents whose endurance enabled prolonged positional dominance. Senior pilots wrote about strategic despair, acknowledging that long-range escorts represented a decisive shift nullifying Germany's remaining aerial advantages. Their reflections suggested resignation, recognizing that technological innovation combined with operational courage allowed adversaries to reach the capital unchallenged. Final entries expressed somber acceptance, documenting a collective understanding that the appearance of distant escorts signaled irreversible transformation within the air war. Their words conveyed melancholy, because confronting enemy fighters capable of crossing entire continents forced pilots to acknowledge impending strategic collapse. The arrival of long-range escorts forced the Luftwaffe to reconsider every assumption about air superiority, because pilots could no longer expect to wait safely for Allied aircraft to exhaust fuel before engaging. Commanders faced a new reality where strategic depth had disappeared overnight, undermining previous defensive planning and training protocols. Training schedules faltered immediately, as instructors scrambled to adapt lessons for pilots now required to confront fully capable fighters far beyond traditional engagement zones. Young aviators struggled with accelerated programs, because the tactical principles that had guided them since 1940 no longer applied when American fighters could operate relentlessly over German territory. Logistical networks strained under new demands because sustaining aircraft in prolonged combat required additional fuel, ammunition, and repair facilities near increasingly contested areas. Supply officers struggled to maintain readiness, noting in reports that every mission now stretched resources, forcing improvisation while risking inefficiency that previously would have been unacceptable in standard operations. Morale declined sharply, recorded in both diaries and internal communications, as pilots confronted the psychological reality of never being able to wait for reinforcements. Veteran flyers expressed frustration openly, recognizing that the very advantage which had allowed them to dominate defensive engagements was now neutralized by relentless, aggressive Allied escorts. Strategic planners identified cascading effects, because extended-range operations disrupted scheduling for rotations, maintenance, and replacement crews. Units had to operate under heightened pressure continuously, with little recovery time, which magnified fatigue and lowered effectiveness, illustrating how operational range alone could destabilize an entire air defense infrastructure designed around predictable patterns. The sudden shift exposed systemic weaknesses because aircraft production, training throughput, and pilot experience could not compensate for the increased attrition caused by deep penetration escort missions. Reports highlighted that even skilled aces faced growing risk, as concentrated attacks from fully capable Allied fighters now penetrated areas once considered secure and operationally safe. Field reports indicated tactical improvisation increased because defending pilots attempted untested maneuvers to counter superior escorts. Their efforts often failed, producing unnecessary losses while eroding confidence in traditional doctrines that had previously reinforced a sense of invulnerability among seasoned Luftwaffe squadrons. Command correspondents documented tension among high-ranking officers, as persistent American escorts forced revisions to operational planning at every level. Orders emphasized caution, yet pilots interpreted these as constraints, exacerbating confusion while reducing initiative. illustrating how deep-range escort missions disrupted both strategic and tactical command structures simultaneously. Morale issues became acute, because extended missions drained energy while undermining confidence in eventual victory. Diaries and letters captured despair, noting that even highly trained units began questioning the feasibility of maintaining effective defense against opponents who could strike decisively at the Reich's industrial and military centers without significant limitation. By the spring of 1944, the Luftwaffe's internal reports reflected a fractured organization, weakened psychologically and operationally. The combination of disrupted training, stretched logistics, and declining morale revealed that deep escort missions had achieved more than protecting bombers. They had fractured the Luftwaffe's backbone, ensuring that continued dominance of the air over Germany was no longer possible. Berlin sprawled beneath the morning haze, industrial complexes and government edifices interwoven with transportation networks, as if the city itself braced for the invisible threat approaching from the west. Pilots of the P-51 Mustangs scanned the skyline carefully, understanding that they were the first Americans to reach this forbidden's political heart directly. Bombers advanced in formation, precise and steady, while Mustang escorts flanked them with unwavering vigilance. Every eye searched for enemy activity, aware that even a single lapse could spell catastrophe. The Luftwaffe, expecting retreating escorts at the range's edge, was unprepared for fighters maintaining combat readiness at this distance. Anti-aircraft batteries erupted as the formations crossed into the designated defense zone, black puffs of flak marking the sky with lethal accuracy. Pilots experienced the tension of entering zones where ordinary resistance was deadly, yet the P-51s maintained altitude and speed, demonstrating their extended operational capability and strategic advantage. German fighter squadrons scrambled desperately, coordinating to intercept what they assumed would be limited American coverage. They were shocked to find Mustangs already positioned for immediate engagement, sustaining altitude and maneuverability. The political capital, previously shielded by distance and expected fighter limitations, now lay exposed to disciplined and highly trained attackers. American pilots maintained formation integrity despite the chaos below, protecting bomber units that carried the strategic weight of the war effort. They engaged selectively, focusing on threats rather than distraction, reinforcing the tactical purpose of their escort mission while projecting power directly over the heart of Nazi governance. Smoke rose from the flak-hit zones, punctuating the sky with evidence of destruction as the bombers pressed on. Mustang pilots adjusted dynamically, anticipating secondary attacks, ensuring the stream remained intact. The visibility of American fighters at this altitude surprised German commanders, challenging assumptions that Berlin was beyond practical reach for single-engine aircraft. Ober Adolf Galland recorded disbelief in personal notes, emphasizing that the presence of American fighters directly above Berlin contradicted intelligence expectations entirely. The psychological impact on German Air Command was immediate. The once inviolable capital now required constant vigilance from fighters who had previously faced minimal opposition. Strategic installations within Berlin appeared more vulnerable than ever, as pilots observed transportation hubs, rail lines, and manufacturing centers beneath the sustained protective screen of the P-51s. The city's defenses, carefully calibrated to deter bombers operating under traditional escort limits, were rendered insufficient by extended-range fighter presence. Commanders documented the operational shift, acknowledging that previous doctrines failed against a system combining endurance, firepower, and precise coordination. The political and industrial core of Germany, once insulated by geography and aircraft limitations, had been breached, signaling a transformation in the war where no target could be assumed secure. By the time the formations completed their bombing runs and prepared for the return journey, the P-51 pilots had demonstrated conclusively that distance no longer provided protection. Berlin had been penetrated, its political heart temporarily exposed, and the strategic calculus of the Luftwaffe had shifted irrevocably under the relentless, unprecedented reach of American long-range fighters. The P-51 Mustangs transformed air strategy, because endurance became the weapon itself, allowing American pilots to maintain constant pressure on German formations and dictate the tempo of engagements. By extending their operational reach beyond conventional limits, they controlled not just space but the psychological state of opposing pilots and command. Deep penetration missions forced German fighters into reactive behavior, because the Americans' ability to remain aloft throughout the mission denied the Luftwaffe opportunities to plan attacks at will. Every maneuver of German interceptors was now constrained, as long-range escorts remained an ever-present, unpredictable threat hovering over both bombers and defensive positions alike. Fuel management became an operational art, with pilots calculating precisely when to consume internal tanks and jettison auxiliary drop tanks. The sequence dictated survival, making every decision critical. Successful missions proved that the combination of careful planning and mechanical reliability transformed what was previously a theoretical advantage into tangible combat control over entire theaters. American squadrons leveraged endurance to enforce protective bubbles around bomber formations, maintaining altitude superiority while anticipating enemy attacks. This constant presence denied Luftwaffe pilots the opportunity to exploit gaps in formation, forcing them to either engage under unfavorable conditions or retreat entirely, redefining the dynamics of air superiority in Central Europe. The psychological effect on German airmen was profound, because no mission could guarantee a safe window to strike bombers. Reports captured a growing sense of inevitability among pilots, realizing that fatigue, attrition, and unpredictable interception by long-range fighters were eroding the confidence once derived from controlled defensive zones. By combining speed, maneuverability, and operational range, American pilots created a 1,000-mile trap where the mere presence of Mustangs constrained enemy decision-making. German units found themselves reacting to positions determined entirely by American endurance, rather than by pre-existing tactical advantages or carefully timed deployments along the Reich's interior corridors. Operational reports highlighted attrition patterns, showing that prolonged missions forced inexperienced pilots into high-risk scenarios. Extended-range escorts amplified German losses not only through direct combat, but also by creating constant pressure, compelling risky maneuvers, exposing mechanical weaknesses, and magnifying mistakes among Luftwaffe crews who had previously relied on predictable engagement ranges. Air superiority evolved into sustained dominance, because the Americans no longer relied solely on numerical advantage. Pilots exploited endurance to outlast opponents, control altitude, and dictate engagements. The combination of preparation, discipline, and aircraft capability allowed them to strike decisively while maintaining strategic initiative across vast operational distances. Command-level assessments noted that endurance altered the war's strategic calculus, because defensive doctrines built on distance, fuel limitations, and rotation schedules were rendered obsolete. The Luftwaffe could no longer rely on calculated attrition to weaken bombers. Each mission was now contested at every stage, fundamentally shifting air warfare strategy over Germany. By mid-1944, the 1,000-mile trap defined the European air war. American fighters dictated where and when battles occurred, enforced protection for bombers, and transformed endurance into control. The Reich's skies were no longer a defensive sanctuary. They had become a contested domain dominated by pilots whose reach extended farther than any enemy had anticipated. The March 1944 missions over Berlin demonstrated a principle that endures in modern airpower doctrine. Range defines strategic influence, because aircraft capable of reaching any point within contested territory alter both tactical engagement and psychological control. The P-51 Mustang proved that technological solutions could reshape the operational environment entirely. Modern air forces study endurance and reach as foundational requirements because the ability to escort, strike, or suppress enemy forces far beyond front lines ensures strategic flexibility. Lessons drawn from the 1,100-mile flights highlight that logistical planning, fuel management, and auxiliary systems are as decisive as speed or firepower in determining mission success. Commanders today understand that denying the enemy sanctuary is crucial, because if opponents cannot rely on distance or isolation for protection, their operational calculations collapse. The Berlin raids illustrated this effect dramatically, as German pilots discovered that geography no longer constrained American fighter presence or influence over critical targets. Endurance also drives aircraft design priorities, because engineers recognize that range, fuel efficiency, and modular auxiliary systems directly impact strategic options. The simplicity of paper drop tanks on the P-51 underscores a principle still relevant: cost-effective, reliable solutions often enable capability leaps more than incremental technological refinements. Air superiority doctrines incorporate lessons from long-range escort missions, because continuous presence over contested airspace compels enemy units into reactive positions. Modern fighter tactics mirror this, emphasizing persistent patrols, high-altitude loiter, and integrated mission planning to ensure that adversaries cannot exploit temporary gaps or assume operational control of key zones. The psychological impact of extended-range operations remains central, because forcing an adversary to confront constant threat and uncertainty degrades morale and decision-making. In 1944, German pilots hesitated where they once pressed attacks confidently. Today, endurance remains a critical factor in shaping enemy behavior without direct engagement. Historical analysis emphasizes that operational systems, not individual elements, define effectiveness, because the P-51's success was contingent on pilots, crew chiefs, engineers, and auxiliary technology functioning cohesively. Modern airpower doctrine applies the same concept, integrating aircraft, support, logistics, and intelligence to achieve a force multiplier effect over theaters of operation. The Berlin missions reinforce combined arms thinking, because strategic bombing could only succeed when fighter escorts had the range to sustain protection. Today's doctrines extend this lesson, coordinating air-to-air, air-to-ground, and electronic warfare capabilities to maintain dominance throughout the mission envelope, ensuring that reach is matched by operational precision. Contemporary strategic planning incorporates the lessons of sustained engagement, because air campaigns now consider not just individual sorties, but operational endurance across time and space. Fuel logistics, forward basing, and aerial refueling reflect the same principle demonstrated in 1944. The ability to project power continuously reshapes conflict dynamics fundamentally. Ultimately, the legacy of the Mustang's Berlin missions transcends history, because they codified a truth that governs modern air power: technological ingenuity, disciplined execution, and extended operational reach can redefine strategic outcomes. Commanders today still draw inspiration from that 1,100-mile shock, reminding the world that the sky itself can be a decisive battlefield.